All right, I'm going to play a clip for you from our favorite host, Rob Schmidt from Newsmax, talking about the major problems New York is having with organized retail crime. Let's check it out.
This Monday night, New York State battered by organized crime. Not the kind you're thinking of, though. According to a recent study from Capital One Shopping, store owners lost $4.4 billion in 2022 due to shoplifting rings. $4.4 billion retailers have lost in New York. Many stores, like the pharmacy right by my apartment, simply shutting down because they're being robbed too often, as New York City leaders are too cowardly to use the police to stop anything. Governor Kathy Hochul signaling to these thugs that she intends to do nothing about it, vetoing a bipartisan bill last week that would have created a task force to combat organized theft. She claimed that adopting the proposal would have cost the state $35 million, money that wasn't allotted in the most recent budget. So stopping a problem that cost $4.4 billion is not worth $35 million. And now she actually is pretending to care about spending.
That's a great point. Something that would cost $35 million to combat something that costs $4.4 billion. She doesn't want to do. But the task force would have created 15 people to combat this retail problem across the retail theft problem they're seeing across New York State. But she didn't want to do it. Vetoed.
Expand the organized crime out to the entire country. That same study revealing stores lost $112 billion to retail theft in 2022. $112 billion was stolen by these heathens that we see running into stores and running out. And since mid-2019, New York City saw a 64% increase in reported shoplifting. LA saw a 61% increase. Those are the two worst, according to the Council on Criminal Justice.
How do you see an increase of 64% and 61%? That is outrageous. Look, America's two biggest cities, New York and Los Angeles, both run by Democrats, coincidentally.
Former Mayor Rudy Giuliani cleaned up New York City back in the 1990s, made it a world-class destination and the world's safest big city. We can't thank him enough for that. What is your message, sir, to Kathy Hochul and the leaders of New York?
I think this is a very, very unique, strange thing I'm going to suggest. So I hope you don't think I'm crazy. But you know how you could stop this? You could arrest them.
Yeah.
And you could put them in jail.
Yeah.
And you could keep them there for lengthy periods of time. A couple of things would happen. First, you would deter the other ones from doing it. And second, you get them the hell off the street so they wouldn't do it. You know, I think there are about 7,000 to 10,000 people walking the streets of New York City that wouldn't be walking the streets of New York City when I was the mayor.
Yeah.
Well, they're the ones who are doing this. I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, what I am seeing is 2020 playing itself out day after day. These people learn this because of what the Democratic mayors and the Soros prosecutors taught them in 2020. That you can go in, you can wipe out a store. The crooked Democratic politicians would say, oh, they're looking for food. But of course, they'd be walking out with $4,000, $5,000 televisions, booze, jewelry, not food.
And he's right. These people like AOC say they're just hungry. They want to feed their families, but they're walking out with TVs or walking out with Jordans, Nikes, all kinds of stuff. If you're hungry, you're not going to be stealing Jordans and flat screen TVs. But he made another point that I want to talk about is he said he believes there are about 7,000 to 10,000 people walking the streets of New York City, which are causing all this. And that's a valid point. It's not everybody that lives there. That's a city of over 8 million people. And you have a small portion of the population who is wreaking havoc on society there. Put these people away, and you have a world-class, a safe city. It would be the safest big city in America again.
These people needed food.
No.
And the cops were just allowed to watch, like they record crime. I mean, I found it outrageous, and I predicted to people that this would happen. And of course, it's happening. I mean, some of the people that have interrupted have gotten arrested for interrupting.
Yeah.
This is outrageous, and it's going to destroy New York City.
Yeah.
if it hasn't destroyed New York City already.
The whole society. I mean, they have embraced this idea that there really are no criminals in society, that the criminals are just people that are down on their luck. I mean, in reality, there is a whole subsection of our society that was waiting for this kind of decriminalization. And the moment that it happened, they said, it's go time. And these are the people, I mean, there's some numbers in New York that show that there's only a couple hundred people that have committed, that have been, thousands and thousands and thousands of crimes.
Yeah.
And those people are so emboldened, and that's why we're seeing all this.
That's always the way it is. I mean, Professor.
I believe I know what study he's talking about. I saw something a while back. This is back in April or so, and there was a couple, maybe 200 people that have been arrested about 6,000 times, if I'm remembering that correctly. I have to look into that, but I think that's what he's talking about.
Professor Wilson figured this out about 1978. He called it career criminal. There's always a relatively few people that commit much larger amounts of crime than you think.
Yes.
And therefore, if you have a good program of concentrating on them, you can reduce crime pretty darn quickly. We call it hotspots. Last time I did it, believe it or not, was in Medellin, Colombia, and within a year we reduced crime by 48%. So it works everywhere, but it's called, you have to arrest them. You have to give them fairly lengthy sentences. And then they don't do it.
It's so simple. It enrages me that we let the dumbest people in society run society, and we do this pretty much in every blue city that we have.
God, are you right? Are you correct? My goodness, yeah. It's a shame. But this is a solvable problem. We have some problems that are very difficult to solve. This is not one of them. This one is solved by any person with goodwill and a decent intellect.
Yeah. Mayor Giuliani, thank you so much. We appreciate it, as always.
Thank you.
All right, in true 1984...
All right. I want to play another video for you first, and then we'll talk about Giuliani and what he did in New York City. And also Mayor Bloomberg, who is a Democrat. Give him credit, too. Give credit where credit is due, what they did to reduce crime in New York City. But first, let's check this out from News Nation, how almost 100% of grocers across the city are dealing with shoplifting on a daily basis.
America, and now nearly all grocers in New York City say they have been victims of shoplifting this year alone.
And 60% of those stores say they've been burglarized every single day of the week.
Okay, so 60% of those 93% deal with it every day.
Week this year. This combined with the sharp rise in resignations at the New York Police Department and also budget cuts that we're told are certain to happen by the mayor have a lot of companies and shop owners worried. Dre Clark is joining us now from New York City. I think a lot of people would be surprised that it's almost every single day.
Well, it's also more than 3,000 grocery stores all across the 5 boroughs. So certainly if you're interested in doing shoplifting, unfortunately, you certainly have a lot of places to choose from. Meanwhile, here in New York City, it's reported that retailers lost more than close to $4.5 billion last year due to shoplifting. That's according to Capital One Shoppers Research. Also, the National Supermarkets Association telling the New York Post recently that in a survey it conducted in September, that 93% of grocery stores surveyed reported they had been hit by shoplifting routinely, in some cases every day of the week. Now, in recent months, we've been telling you how stores all across the country have been keeping items like toothpaste and soaps and detergents behind closed glass doors, because these are among the items that shoplifters seem to steal the most, and it's happening in stores all across the country. Certainly an inconvenience for customers, but a desperate security measure for retailers. Meanwhile, the mayor of New York City recently announcing plans to freeze the hiring of new police officers through 2025. There is now a real concern among business owners that shoplifting will skyrocket.
That's a big problem. You're freezing hiring for police officers for over the next year, from now till the end of 2023. You're gonna freeze all the way to 2025. Now, I'm not. Maybe those budget cuts take place at the beginning of next year. I don't know. But uh, that's a problem. You're putting a freeze on hiring, and then you're also having police officers leaving. We'll get into that too.
And become 10 times worse. The police department is already trying to replace some 3,000 officers who have either
There you
retired or
go.
resigned in the last 3 years or so. But the really alarming number this year is a departure of close to 2,500 police officers so far this year, leaving the job, and many more are expected to do the same before the year is out. The mass exodus means more officers potentially working longer hours on a regular basis to make up for the gap in manpower. Now, many business owners say the problem here in New York State is that any retail theft under $1,000 is considered a misdemeanor and there is no bail required. So shop owners say in many cases, those individuals who are arrested for shoplifting will be released from jail and then come right back to the same store and steal more items because they know ultimately they will not be held behind bars for more than a few hours or so. They say that's the real problem, and if they want to cut down on the number of shoplifting happening here in New York City, they have to do something about bail reform. Marquis.
93%. And
Whew, 93%. But see, that's the problem. Is you have these weak DAs, soft on crime DAs, Soros-backed DAs, who are not going to prosecute uh, these people like they should be prosecuted for stealing anything from a store. But anyway, crime dropped under stop and frisk, which is worth remembering in the rush to criticize it. Stop and frisk was a policy in place which Giuliani really hammered on. It's when you see somebody that you feel like is suspected of committing a crime, you stop them and frisk them. A lot of times you find a weapon on them, you find drugs, you get weapons and drugs off the street, crime goes down. Anyway, so it talked about how New York was dealing with an unprecedented amount of crime in the 80s. It said New York homicide rates rose from 4.7 per 100,000 in 1960 to a peak of 31 in 1991. That is insane. 4.7 out of 100,000 to 31. I've heard about this. I've heard about this back in the 80s when crime was rampant in New York City. Here we go. In 1991, under Mayor David Dinkins, New York began to expand its police force and adopted a community policing model emphasizing foot patrol and combating low-level disorder. 3 years later, after the election of Mayor Rudy Giuliani, New York began to place greater emphasis on stop and frisk tactics, in which officers would briefly detain somebody they suspected of wrongdoing and perform a pat-down frisk for weapons. New York also adopted a system of statistical analysis known as CompStat, which targeted enforcement at hot spots of crime and imposed greater managerial accountability on police command staff. The policy was continued by New York's next mayor, Bloomberg, who took office in 2002. Beginning in 1991, New York experienced the broadest and deepest decline in violent crime of any major American city. By 2013, Bloomberg's last year as mayor, the murder rate dropped to 3.3 out of per 100,000 population, or 335 in a city of more than 8 million. Chicago, in contrast, with a population less than half of New York City, had 415 homicides in 2013. New York's homicide drop was concentrated in firearms-related homicides committed outdoors. I mean, that's exactly what it takes to stop crime, to reduce crime. You're not going to stop it completely, but you can really reduce it by these tactics, by targeting hotspots, like Giuliani said, targeting hotspots where people were committing the most amount of crime. You target those areas, and they did this in the city I live in. I'm not going to say where I live, but people who know me personally know where I live. And it's not a big city, but it's about 50,000 people. But there's an officer here who said the part of town that had the most amount of crime, he talked to the police department about just going there every single day, talking to the residents every single day. He would go to these apartment complexes where there was gang members who lived there who were let out of prison, moving back to their mom's house, and the mom was scared because their sons were back home. He would go and talk to the neighbors, and he built a relationship with them. And so that place went from the most dangerous part of the city, which was not really dangerous compared to other places in major in other cities, like in the worst part of Los Angeles. This part I'm talking about is nothing compared to that. But for my city itself, it had the highest crime rate, and by him going there every single day and then putting focusing on this hot spot, this hot zone, where they may have been passing off drugs a lot of at the corner. Uh, like I said, you may have some gang members who are just out of prison who are living with their mom, maybe wanting to commit more crimes. I don't know, but putting emphasis on this area, it went from from the worst part of town to not even the top five of the highest crime areas in the city. Not even top 10, he said. All right, as you saw, 2,500 NYPD officers turned their badges in 2023 amid concerning trend. Since October 31st, reporting numbers through October 31st, 2023, the New York Post detailed that 2,516 officers had quit, the fourth highest number in the past decade, and 43% more than the 1,750 who hightailed it in 2018 before the pandemic and crime spikes hit the city. Of those, 1,040 were short of their 20 years of service of full pensions, a 104% increase from 2020, but down from 1,524 from the year prior. A graduate of the 2004 Police Academy told the Post anonymously, "I keep in contact with the guys I was in the police academy with, and we all have the same notion. I think maybe 95% of us are planning on leaving. Making matters worse is part of Adams' goal of a 5% budget cut to make up for hundreds of millions spent covering the expenses of illegal aliens putting illegals in hotels. The next 5 police academy classes were reportedly canceled. Wow. As a result, the force was expected to drop to around 29,000 officers through the end of fiscal year 2025, a size unseen since the mid 1990s. Wow. We've been working an average of about 13 to 14 hours a day, with lots of protests happening in the city. Enough is enough. I'll have maybe one day off for the week, and I'm so tired from work I don't want to do anything," the 45-year-old veteran lamented. Even younger officers burning themselves out. As 28-year-old with 4 years on the job is unbearable now, and he's looking to leave sooner than later. Now, these are just a couple of examples I'm talking about. You have a guy who's 45 years old. He's a veteran, been with NYPD for a while, it seems like, burned out, working 13, 14 hours a day, gets one day off a week and doesn't want to do anything because he's so dang tired. I mean, it's not like you're on your feet, you're in your car, you're dealing with giving people tickets, arresting people, and it's frustrating. You're dealing with all kinds of people throughout the day. It's not an easy job being a police officer. I feel for these guys. Yes, you get overtime and things like that, but a lot of times the money is not worth it. And you have these dummies in New York City uh, declaring themselves a sanctuary city, and now they have to deal with this nonsense because uh, they, like I said, they declare themselves a sanctuary city, and they have to account for that. They have to compensate for that somehow. So what do? They cut budgets around the city. It says Mayor Eric Adams announced a 110 billion budget cut, saying cuts across all agencies were necessary, with the city having spent 1.45 billion in fiscal 2023 on the migrant crisis, and nearly 11 billion expected to be spent in 2024 and 2025. Wow. So this is what Eric Adams says. And while we pulled it off this time, we make no mistake, migrant costs are going up, tax revenue is slowing, growth is slowing, and COVID stimulus funding is drying up. Okay, so he tells you right there, tax revenue growth is slowing because you have inflation, things like that. The economy may be slowing. People are not spending as much. COVID money is drying up. More illegal aliens are coming through because of Joe Biden's policies. And then Eric Adams, who lives in the city, he even said before he got elected or after he got elected, something like that, that they will continue to be a sanctuary for migrants. So this is on you, Eric Adams. You are part of the problem, sir. If you would have put your foot down, maybe you wouldn't be dealing with this nonsense. But yeah, this is what happens when you have left-wing lunatic politicians running your state and city. You have billions and billions of dollars being taken from these retailers, stores closing, people losing their jobs, and then you have dumb governors. The people of New York had an opportunity to vote these people out. You have what's his name, Lee Zeldin. You had Lee Zeldin who could have turned that state around. I mean, yes, he got closer than a lot of people expected him to, but imagine if he had won the to be governor of the state of New York. Imagine where things would be right now. Yes, it wouldn't happen overnight, but he would have put a big emphasis on crime. That's what he was running on, crime, reducing crime, safety. Public safety is something we deal with every day. It affects everybody. So they also had an opportunity to put in a conservative or Republican in the mayor position in NYC, but they decided to go with the bonehead Eric Adams. And now look what they're dealing with. Migrant crisis, budget cuts, police officers leaving in droves, retail theft out of control. So this is what you get when you vote for these stupid people. That's why I keep saying it's so important to get to the polls and vote for the person who is toughest on crime, or at least has some common sense. Because this affects your everyday life, people. Everybody. So I'm going to leave it at that. It's late. I don't know what time you're going to listen to this, but I am tired. And I will see you on the next video. Thank you. Like and subscribe. Have a good one.